A limping vet enters a gun store, ignored, the one that had stayed by his side through countless battlefields. But the clerk scoffed. "You can't afford it, old man." No one asked his name. No one knew they had just turned away a chapter from the veteran stories America is forgetting. He left. No reaction. No words. Only one woman quietly pulled out her phone. "He's here." An hour later, the door opened. 12 Navy SEALs walked in. No words. No threats. They just stood there, reclaiming the honor of a man they called brother. At Justice for Veterans, we tell stories like this. Stories of forgotten heroes you need to know. His name is Frank Dalton. He lives alone in an old wooden house on the outskirts of town. No wife, no children, no one waiting for him at night. Every morning, he walks into town, a slow, limping gait, leaning on a worn wooden cane. The faded SEAL cap on his head nobody notices. They assume it's just a souvenir from a gift shop. But inside him are memories. Memories of nights spent deep in the jungle, his back against blood-soaked earth and gunfire. Memories of brothers who never came home. Each time he passes the gun store, he stops at the display window, staring at the Mon Garand as if he's looking at a forgotten piece of his soul. Frank stepped into the store, as quiet as a shadow. The door chime rang soft, but sharp like a needle. Kyleth, the young clerk, glanced at him, smirking. "I don't think you can afford that, old man. That rifle's not just for show." Frank said nothing. He simply looked at the Mon, as if it was breathing with him, as if he could hear the echoes of war again. "Wrong place, Gramps. This isn't a retirement home." They didn't ask his name, didn't care for the silence in his eyes. All they saw was a frail figure with a shaky walk. They didn't see the man who once stood at the edge of life and death. Frank nodded, turned around, and no one in that store realized who they had just sent away. At the far end of the ammo counter stood a quiet woman, Sarah Collins' brown hair tied back, eyes full of thought. She said nothing, just watched. She saw how Frank looked at the rifle, saw that his gaze wasn't one of a shopper, but someone reliving a memory buried deep. She saw Kyle's arrogance, Troy's mockery, and Frank's silent retreat. No protest, no anger, only calmness, as if he was used to being forgotten. Sarah left the store, walked out slow, steady, pulled out her phone, dialed a short number. "He's arrived." The other end was silent. Then the call ended, no response, and history began to turn its wheels. 1 hour later, the gun store looked the same. Kyle was wiping down the counter. Troy was laughing at his phone. The door chime rings. A man walked in, tall, wearing a Navy SEAL jacket, silent. Then a second man, a third, a fourth. No one said a word, no questions. They simply entered, one after another. Total, 12 men, standing side by side at the counter, shoulders squared, eyes locked forward. No threats, no weapons drawn. They didn't come to start trouble. They came to defend honor. The honor of one man. Kyle stepped back. His hand trembled slightly, and for the first time, no one in the store dared to speak. Yod. The man leading the SEALs stepped up to the counter. He didn't shout, didn't show anger. He simply placed an old worn photo on the glass. "His name is Frank Dalton. He saved my life, and the lives of many others. He held his position alone under heavy fire so the rest of us could escape." Kyle's mouth dropped open. Marcus didn't look at him. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled something else out. A scorched piece of American flag cloth. Blood. Stained. Torn edges. He ripped this from a teammate's shredded uniform and kept it from that day until now. Marcus raised his eyes, locking in. "You didn't just turn away an old man, you turned away a legend." No one from Frank's team survived except Marcus. He looked down at the photo. Frank bandaging a young soldier, blood pooling beneath. Frank never spoke of what he did. He only said, "I did my job," and lived like none of it mattered. A SEAL behind him stepped forward. He took out an old unit, patch-faded, chipped, rusted. placed it beside the photo and whispered, "He carried this his whole life. Today, we bring it back, not because he needs it, but because we need to remember." The store fell silent. Only soft breathing remained, and the unspoken truth. They had just turned away a piece of history. In the corner of the store, a customer held his phone, his hand slightly shaking. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. 12 seals, standing silent like statues. Before them, the faded photo and the scorched flag cloth. No one spoke. No one moved. Click, a photo was taken. Posted online with the caption, "They didn't come to buy guns. They came to honor a forgotten hero." Within 2 hours, the post had over 200 shares. The hashtag, "Remember Frank Dalton," spread everywhere. Media picked it up. Veteran groups started speaking out. No one imagined the man dismissed that day would become a symbol the entire nation was now searching for. The quiet little town suddenly stirred. People lined up outside the gun store not to shop, but to see the place where Frank Dalton was insulted and then restored. The store owner bowed in apology. Kyle and Troy were nowhere to be seen. Inside, the Montnegrin now sat proudly behind glass. Beside it, the battlefield photo and the scorched cloth. On the glass read, "He once carried this. Now we carry the memory." The townspeople began to change. They stopped to greet him on the street. They smiled, nodded, as if offering the thanks they'd forgotten to say. But Frank still said nothing. Here, Frank Dalton still walked every morning, still limping, still with the old wooden cane and his faded seal cap. People greeted him. Some asked for photos, others just watched, eyes glistening. Frank only nodded. No smiles, no retreat, and no words. When reporters came looking for him, he said just one sentence, "I didn't do anything special. I just survived." He refused interviews, made no speeches. He didn't live to be remembered. But now, no one could forget him. And then, someone started digging deeper into Frank, into the things he never spoke about. One Saturday morning, Frank sat at the old cafe in his usual window seat. Black coffee, no sugar, still steaming. The bell rang. 1, 2, 3 men in seal gear walked in, then all 12. No one said a word. They walked up to Frank's table. The leader Marcus spoke gently. "May we sit with you?" Frank looked up. His eyes met theirs. No greetings, no tears, just a nod. Slow, deep. And 13 men sat together in silence, but not apart. The second coffee arrived. No one ordered it. They didn't need to say anything, because what mattered was already understood. That evening, as the cafe quieted, a woman approached. Sarah Collins, the same woman who stood silently at the ammo counter. Frank looked at her and nodded, not surprised, as if he'd known all along. She sat beside him and pulled something from her coat pocket. An old army medic badge, its corner broken, worn, like it had been kept for years. Basra, 1993. You bandaged my leg. I was 19. I didn't think I'd survive. Frank looked at her, silent. I couldn't save you then. But this time, I just wanted to make sure you wouldn't leave this world forgotten. And for the first time, Frank smiled. God. The next week, a local high school held a Veterans Appreciation event. They invited Frank Dalton as guest of honor. The invitation was hand-delivered, but Frank never responded. A few days later, a worn brown envelope was left at the school gate. No sender. Inside was a handwritten letter, blue ink, smudged in places. In 1970, we were trapped deep in the Panama jungle. Rain poured like punishment. A teammate took a gut shot, bleeding non-stop. I wasn't a medic, but I kept him alive. That's not heroism. That's duty. There was no signature, Only one line at the bottom. Someone who was there. H. That letter was read aloud at the tribute event. The auditorium went completely still. No one knew who wrote it, but everyone felt the truth behind each word. An 11th grader stood up, eyes red, and said, "When I grow up, I want to be like him. Not flashy, just right." The video of the ceremony was posted online. Overnight, it appeared on major news outlets. CNN, Fox, even Military Times retold the story of Frank Dalton. Veteran organizations began speaking up about others like him. Quiet lives, quietly fading. Frank still refused interviews. He simply continued living his modest life, but now, every step he took was no longer alone. And then, one day, they saw his familiar seal cap on the table, but the chair was empty. Frank Dalton passed away, quietly, just as he had lived. No parades, no spotlight, only a faded seal cap and 13 prepaid cups of coffee. But his footsteps remained in people's eyes, in stories passed on from one to another and to generations to come. There are heroes who need no medals, only to be remembered with respect. Frank wasn't the exception. He was living proof that loyalty doesn't need applause, and that silence can carry the loudest truth. At Justice for Veterans, we tell the stories that history left behind. If you've ever met someone like Frank Dalton, leave a comment. I will not forget, because Justice for Veterans starts by remembering their names.